The Oderbruch floodplain is silent now, but beneath its shifting soil, the ghosts of 1945 still breathe. In early March 2023, a team of hydrologists installing new levee sensors stumbled upon a corroded metal surface buried in the mud, an airtight steel hatch with no listing in municipal archives. What lay below had been erased from every post-war map, its existence redacted by both Allied and Soviet occupation forces. Days later, when the hatch was forced open under controlled conditions, the air that escaped carried traces of chlorine and oil, a scent older than memory. They had unearthed a bunker built not for defense, but for research. Inside were walls lined with Reich insignia, medical gurneys, and film canisters labeled Project Morgenstern. For 78 years, this underground chamber had slept in the dark, a secret laboratory designed to push the human body beyond the limits of survival. Now, for the first time, light reached its corridors, and the history Germany tried to bury began to whisper back. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Bunker Beneath Oderbruch. At 52° 10, 4N, 14-18-42-7E, in the marshy stretch east of Berlin, a sudden shift in the Oder River's water level had exposed something metallic jutting from the soil. Local engineers first assumed it was an old drainage system from pre-war infrastructure. Only after the excavation team cleared away the mud did they see the faint outline of a reinforced hatch, the kind used for deep-level civil defense shelters. The structure bore no registry markings, no stamp from the East German Ministry for State Security, no record in the Bundesarchive. It was, as the municipal engineer noted in his report, non-existent. 2 days later, a field team from Brandenburg State Heritage and the Federal Office for Radiation Protection arrived to assess the site. Hazmat suits, portable lighting, and a sealed perimeter followed. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Leonie Hartmann, logged her initial observations on 13 March 2023 at 08:47 local time. Subterranean structure, German WWII construction, unmapped. Air readings show minor traces of nitrogen oxide and phenol, possible chemical contamination. Video footage from her helmet camera would later circulate quietly among government archivists. The descent revealed a narrow shaft reinforced with iron latticework, descending roughly 30 meters into the ground before opening into a vast concrete corridor. On the walls, faded stencils read, Project Morgenstern, Sector 4. At first, it appeared to be a standard late-war command post. The Germans had built hundreds of underground facilities across Eastern Europe as the Red Army advanced. But this one was different. Every door was hermetically sealed. Some bore medical insignia rather than military. Others had been welded shut from the inside. When Hartmann's team entered the main chamber, they found 3 metal tables, rusted instruments, and something that unsettled even the most composed among them. Skeletal remains strapped to gurneys, secured with leather restraints. Time and decay had made them brittle, but the positioning was unmistakable. These were not casualties of war, they were subjects. The team halted work immediately. Police units secured the perimeter, and an unmarked government van arrived before dusk. 2 men from the Bundesnachrichtendienst introduced themselves only by initials, KR and HW, and ordered all video data confiscated for national preservation purposes. Excavation logs were to continue, but all press contact was suspended. Hartmann's notes after that day are terse. On March 17th, she wrote, Room 3B accessed. Found crates labeled Reichspostschutz, Transport Gut, 1945. Within, glass ampoules containing clear liquid, several broken. Labels unreadable except fragment, Versuch Reihe 12, radiation readings normal. Weeks later, declassified fragments began to surface through unofficial channels. A memo from the OSS dated 29th July 1945, subject, Operation Eclipse, priority target E9, referenced a biophysical endurance facility located in the Oderbruch marshlands, coordinates strikingly close to Hartmann's discovery. The report suggested that Allied forces were aware of the complex's existence, but failed to secure it before Soviet occupation. Subsequent intelligence exchanges during the early Cold War quietly erased references to the site, likely as part of mutual scientific appropriations. Between the US and the USSR, the name Morgenstern appeared nowhere else in the archives. What the investigators pieced together in the following months was disturbing. Among the artifacts recovered from sealed storage rooms were film reels marked Serie Kelter 1944-45. One reel, once restored, revealed footage of uniformed personnel conducting controlled hypothermia tests on human subjects immersed in ice water. Thermometers were visible. Timers ticked. A man in a white coat, identified through facial recognition as SS Sturmbannführer Dr. Otto Krüger, can be seen recording pulse rates on a clipboard. Krüger's name had appeared on the Nuremberg prosecution lists but was later struck from trial documents due to insufficient evidence. His whereabouts after 1945 were unknown. By late April 2023, the German Ministry of Defense classified all recovered material under Temporary Protection Order 2417B, citing potential violations of international bioethics law. Still, whispers leaked. A journalist from Der Spiegel, using leaked internal correspondence, published a short piece titled Das Labor unter dem Fluss. It lasted less than 12 hours online before being taken down. The article quoted one anonymous official: "We found proof that post-war governments East and West both knew of this site. They agreed to silence it because its research became the foundation of later military survival studies." In May, restoration of a collapsed tunnel unearthed another section of the complex. Inside, the walls bore marks from an apparent explosion. Structural engineers determined the blast came from within. It was likely that the staff had attempted to destroy records before Soviet capture. Yet in the debris, archivists uncovered a scorched ledger partially intact, labeled Morgensturm Testreihen 47. The entries, dated between February and April 1945, catalogued 61 test subjects identified only by number. Notes referenced controlled freezing, oxygen deprivation, and chemical reanimation attempts. Some pages mentioned a compound designated MK32, a formula speculated to prolong cellular activity after cardiac arrest. Later chemical analysis of residue samples matched no known post-war pharmaceuticals, suggesting the line of research vanished entirely after the facility's destruction. Dr. Hartmann, who initially led the excavation, resigned from the project in June, citing personal reasons. Her colleagues later stated she had grown paranoid, convinced she was being monitored. When contacted months later by a documentary team, she refused to speak on camera, but sent an encrypted message reading simply, "It didn't end in 1945, they built on it." Meanwhile, documents unearthed from the US National Archives in College Park, Maryland, hinted at the connection. A memorandum from 1952, filed under the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, referenced medical endurance data acquired under Eclipse Agreement. 1947. That phrasing coincided with the American initiative known as Operation Paperclip, which brought former German scientists into US research institutions. The data from Morgensturm, it seemed, had not been lost at all. It had been absorbed, on-site. Excavation continues under federal supervision, though progress has slowed. Recent environmental readings detected traces of phenolic compounds and unstable metallic residues, suggesting experimental coolant systems far more advanced than known wartime technology. A sealed subchamber, designated Vault C, remains unexplored due to flooding and contamination risk. The government has yet to release any official findings. Satellite imagery shows that the Oderbruch site is now covered by temporary hangars and tarpaulin, guarded around the clock. Locals say trucks arrive at night carrying unmarked containers. No lights are visible. The area is off-limits under a classified environmental remediation order. But rumors persist that within those containers lie preserved tissue samples, cryogenic units, and perhaps the complete research log of Dr. Krüger himself. What makes Project Morgensturm so troubling is not merely its brutality, but the trail it left behind. A pattern of silence extending from 1945 through the Cold War, involving agencies on both sides of the Iron Curtain, each profiting from data born of suffering. The documents that escaped destruction suggest that the bunker was not an isolated experiment, it was one of several. Notes in the ledger mention corresponding facilities B12 and D9, possibly located near Breslau and Prague. No such sites have yet been found. As the evidence mounts, historians face an uneasy realization. The line dividing Allied and Axis science blurred long before the war ended. The knowledge extracted in hidden chambers like Morgensturm did not vanish with Germany's defeat. It evolved quietly, rebranded, and integrated into the research of nations that once condemned it. For decades, its existence was buried beneath treaties, sealed archives, and deliberate amnesia. Now, as the Oderbruch yields its secrets, the question is no longer whether the world knew, but how much of modern medicine and military physiology still carries the imprint of that forgotten bunker. The last entry in Dr. Hartmann's field notebook, dated June 12, 2023, remains underlined 3 times in red ink. Under Sector 4 corridor found additional shaft, leads deeper, possible lower level, access denied by federal command, not to be reopened. Since then, no further excavation reports have been released. Officially, the site is under restoration to prevent environmental hazard. Unofficially, it has become a black hole in the landscape of history, an abyss of silence swallowing everything that dares to illuminate it. Chapter 2: The Vanished Convoy of the Barents Sea. In February 2021, the Norwegian Maritime Directorate commissioned a series of deep-water sonar surveys along the Barents Sea, part of a renewed initiative to map wartime wrecks for environmental hazards. The Arctic's cold depths had preserved hundreds of vessels sunk during the convoy battles of World War II, but one contact, logged on the 17th of February at 73 degrees 28 N, 30 41E, stood out. The sonar profile showed a hull length of approximately 130 meters, too long for a trawler, too slender for a tanker. Its silhouette bore no resemblance to any documented wreck. Within days, the research vessel Håkon Mosby was rerouted to investigate. What they found would unravel a mystery suppressed for over 75 years. Divers descended through the WWII, frozen dark, and found the name MV Cordillera faintly visible beneath layers of marine growth. According to British Admiralty records, the Cordillera had vanished in March 1946, shortly after departing from Scapa Flow on what was described as a routine post-war logistics mission. It was presumed lost to weather. Yet, curiously, no debris field had ever been located, until now. As remotely operated vehicles probed the wreck, they transmitted images of containers stenciled Ministry of Supply, Priority A, classified. One still carried the faint red marking, Operation Sentinel. Within 24 hours, the Norwegian government quietly halted public access to the wreck data, citing unexploded ordnance risk. Behind the official explanation, however, a separate file circulated within NATO naval intelligence, under the title Barents Object 2202C. For months, speculation brewed in maritime circles. Some suspected the ship had been ferrying Nazi loot, others believed it carried secret military equipment. But in June 2021, when 2 engineers from Bergen University leaked a portion of the sonar footage, the narrative shifted. The cargo hold appeared filled with cylindrical arrays, metallic latticework, and large parabolic dishes, equipment resembling radar assemblies. Their dimensions matched those of early experimental German long-range detection systems developed in 1944 under the Jagdhaus initiative. Documents declassified decades earlier had hinted that the Allies had captured such systems intact. The discovery of the Cordillera suggested otherwise. Rather than seizing them, someone had attempted to smuggle them into the sea. A series of declassified cables from the UK National Archives, file reference DEFI 24-1128, offered a partial answer. The messages, dated between February and April 1946, discussed the transport of sensitive materials derived from Operation Sentinel for disposal or reallocation. Sentinel, historians later confirmed, was the codename for a joint British-American intelligence mission to recover advanced radar and signal technologies from occupied Germany. The mission had been intended to consolidate all such research before the Soviet Union could claim it under the terms of post-war division. One memo, stamped Top Secret, Eyes Only, stated, "Due to the classified nature of the apparatus, destruction at sea may be preferable to transfer. Confirm Royal Navy escort readiness." The memo bore the signature of Rear Admiral J. F. Rowley, Deputy Chief of Naval Intelligence. In other words, the Cordillera had likely been chosen as the disposal vessel. But the question remained, why sink it with the equipment aboard, rather than dismantle it on land? Further investigation revealed an unsettling answer. Within the files of the Royal Aircraft Establishment RAE at Farnborough, a report labelled Project Helios March 1946 described a catastrophic failure during radar testing using hybridized German and British components. The system had reportedly emitted microwave frequencies powerful enough to damage nearby instruments and cause neurological effects among test staff. After the incident, the project was abruptly discontinued, and all related hardware ordered, sealed, or destroyed. It appeared that the Cordillera was carrying Helios prototypes, dangerous relics of technology both sides had been racing to perfect. Norwegian recovery teams, operating under joint supervision, extracted several sealed crates from the site in late 2021. Inside were radar modules packed in lead-lined cases. Each bore mixed manufacturing codes. British serial plates mounted onto components of clear German design. One container held documents still legible under lamination. Blueprints marked FUMG-80 Berlin D-Type X combined pulse array, annotated in English handwriting. Among the papers was a small envelope containing microfilm reels labelled for US personnel, copy number 7. The chain of custody that followed remains classified, but journalists later traced shipments to a secure facility in North Yorkshire, associated with Defence Science and Technology Laboratory operations. When pressed for comment, a ministry spokesperson stated only, "Recovered items are being analysed for environmental safety." Parallel to the British inquiry, Russian naval historians grew interested in the discovery. Declassified fragments from Soviet archives hinted that in May 1946, a Northern Fleet patrol had intercepted unidentified radio transmissions off the Barents Coast, believed to be emanating from a British vessel. The patrol report, catalogued as Archive File R11846, described an unusual signal of alternating frequency bursts consistent with experimental radar testing. The Soviet submarine S-92 reportedly tracked the source for several hours before losing contact amid heavy weather. The coordinates given in that report matched the Cordillera's final resting place within 10 kilometers. Soviet intelligence at the time suspected a secret NATO test rather than an accident and noted, ominously, that the vessel likely carried equipment intended for transference or disposal to prevent capture. Modern spectral analysis of the wreck's remains has deepened the mystery. Scientists from Tromsø University examining corrosion patterns found evidence of an onboard explosion, but not from munitions, rather from an electrical surge. Burn traces within the hull indicated that the radar apparatus may have activated just before the ship sank. The electromagnetic pulse could have disabled communications and navigation, leading to the ship's disappearance without distress signals. In effect, the Cordillera might have sunk itself. A chilling detail emerged from testimony of one of the ship's last known crew members, recorded in 1961, but forgotten until now. Leading seaman Alfred Moore, interviewed during a Ministry of Defence inquiry into post-war losses, stated, "We were told we were moving scrap radar. The crates were humming. You could feel it in your teeth. Then one night the sea lit up green, like a storm without thunder. They told us to forget it." His statement was dismissed at the time as delusional. It has since been re-examined. By 2022, the Cordillera investigation had drawn the attention of multiple European ministries. A joint NATO task force classified much of the data, citing national security implications. However, among leaked documents appeared a remarkable internal brief from the British Defence Intelligence Staff, dated 11th September 2021. Recovered materials demonstrate operational parity between wartime German detection systems and classified Western prototypes developed post-1947. Potential evidence of unauthorized bilateral technology exchange under Sentinel oversight. The phrase unauthorized bilateral exchange alluded to covert collaboration between Allied and Soviet engineers in the immediate post-war period, an alliance denied by both governments. The secrecy surrounding the Cordillera aligns with a broader pattern observed in Cold War intelligence. Both sides sought to erase their early cooperation over captured Nazi technologies, preferring to frame innovation as purely domestic. Yet, recovered archives repeatedly reveal joint scientific meetings under neutral oversight in 1946–47, particularly in Norway and Denmark. If the Cordillera was part of this, Its sinking represented an act of purging the evidence rather than preserving it. As of 2025, the wreck lies under permanent protection. Its coordinates have been removed from public maritime charts. Independent dives are prohibited. The official reason remains environmental safety, but local fishermen report seeing naval drones patrolling the area even in calm weather. Some claim that on sonar, the wreck still emits faint rhythmic pulses, as if something inside continues to operate. The tragedy of the Cordillera is twofold: a vessel erased from records to hide the failure of forbidden science, and a historical narrative rewritten to cleanse both victors and vanquished. In classified correspondence between the US Navy and the British Admiralty, a single line stands out, typed in faint blue ink at the bottom of a 1947 memorandum. Project Sentinel concluded, "Materials neutralized, crew fate undisclosed." Those words, long buried, now resurface like the wreck itself, proof that beneath the frozen sea lies more than metal. It is a monument to secrecy, one the world was never meant to uncover. Chapter 3. Ghost Signals from the Kola Peninsula. In January 2019, an amateur radio operator from Helsinki named Marko Vuorinen noticed something strange while monitoring standard atmospheric bands near 6 MHz. The signal, faint and irregular, carried a repeating burst of encrypted Morse patterns followed by 30 seconds of silence. At first, he assumed it was a weather station malfunction, but the pattern repeated precisely every 11 minutes, 22 seconds. Over the following weeks, operators across northern Finland and Norway began reporting identical transmissions, triangulated to an uninhabited region of the Kola Peninsula, once closed to all civilian access. The coordinates 60 Seftig 40 48 N, 32 Degrau 8 15E fell within a restricted area known for abandoned Soviet installations. When the signal was analyzed by digital encryption experts from the University of Oulu, the data fragments contained embedded timestamps from 1959 and a frequency modulation signature matching Soviet military encoding. It was a broadcast that shouldn't exist, sent by equipment that should have fallen silent decades ago. In April, a Finnish-Russian environmental team conducting field research under the Arctic Monitoring Initiative gained rare permission to enter the area. Officially, they were studying permafrost degradation near former military infrastructure. Unofficially, they sought the signal's source. After 3 days of navigating ice-crusted roads and collapsing communication towers, the team located a structure partially buried under snow, a reinforced steel dome protruding from the tundra, its entrance sealed with welded plates. Spray-painted across the door was a faded Cyrillic inscription: Object 472, Dostуп запрещен. Object 472, access prohibited. Using portable plasma cutters, the team breached the hatch and descended into darkness. The interior air was metallic and still, preserved by the permafrost. Frozen cables snaked along the walls. In the command room, they found a functioning generator, humming faintly with residual current. Somehow, after all these years, the system was still drawing minimal power from a decaying thermoelectric reactor buried below, and in the center of the main console, a transmission unit blinked red every 11 minutes. Vuorinen's signal had found its origin, a Cold War listening post left operational by time itself. Archival cross-referencing later identified Object 472 as part of the Soviet Krepost network, an array of early warning radar and signals intelligence bases established in the late 1950s to monitor NATO activity across the Scandinavian corridor. The Kola installations were designed to intercept high-frequency radio from submarines and long-range bombers, relaying encrypted summaries to command centers in Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. When the Soviet Union collapsed, most of these facilities were decommissioned or dismantled, but Object 472 had never been officially recorded as existing. It was, in bureaucratic terms, a ghost. Inside the control chamber, technicians discovered racks of reel-to-reel data tapes sealed within airtight cabinets. Each bore the label Severny Veterchal, Northern Wind 4. The first tape, once carefully defrosted and restored, contained recorded signal logs dated from May 1958 to October 1963. Among routine radio intercepts, civilian chatter, NATO flight frequencies, there were anomalous entries marked with red grease pencil, blue flame. These sections included intercepted transmissions in English, referencing test runs, propulsion readings, and containment metrics. Later analysis confirmed that blue flame corresponded to a classified American nuclear propulsion project, one that officially began in 1959 under the aegis of the Atomic Energy Commission. The Soviets, it appeared, had been listening from the Arctic. Declassified CIA reports, notably file RC33276, released in 2014, make brief mention of unexplained Arctic intercepts detected by NORAD in 1961. The timing aligns precisely with Object 472's operational peak, yet the American response, labeled Operation Nighthold, focused not on silencing the transmissions, but on locating their origin. According to these records, US reconnaissance planes were dispatched to the Kola region multiple times between 1960 and 1962 under cover of meteorological missions. None identified the installation. Soviet documentation later revealed that Object 472 was intentionally built under a geologic ridge to evade aerial detection. Its signal was transmitted through an underground antenna array shielded by permafrost, a marvel of hidden engineering even by modern standards. But the strangest revelation came from the logs dated 1963. The transmissions abruptly stopped for 2 weeks, then resumed with a new signal pattern. Not intelligence intercepts, but fragments of automated Morse repeating the same phrase over and over. Stoi Komandnoi Code 9. Halt Command Code 9. Analysts believe this was an emergency failsafe designed to trigger an automatic shutdown. For reasons unknown, the command failed. The system remained active, sending out its lonely pulses for half a century. Only in 2019, when permafrost erosion exposed part of the antenna structure, did its broadcast again reach the wider world. When researchers extracted and catalogued the contents of the data reels, they found not only military transmissions but a trove of documents preserved in wax-sealed containers. The papers, typed on yellowing Soviet letterhead, were stamped with the crest of the Ministry of Medium Machine Building, the agency responsible for nuclear research. File 472B41 contained transcripts of internal meetings discussing cross-analysis of Western reactor designs, acquired through intercept data. 1. Memo dated 1961 made direct reference to American propulsion prototypes labeled Project Blue Flame, likely nuclear thermal jet applications. This suggested that Soviet engineers were years ahead in tracking US nuclear technology development and possibly replicated aspects of it in their own secret programs. In essence, Object 472 had acted as the Soviet window into American nuclear propulsion research. The most unsettling find, however, was the so-called second logbook. Its cover bore only a number, 065807. Inside were handwritten notes in Russian and English, phrases like joint analysis, control sample received 5.661, and return package scheduled Murmansk implied an exchange of physical material between superpower scientists at the height of the Cold War. Though no official record of such cooperation exists, several historians believe these notes refer to covert data swaps through third-party intermediaries, possibly using Scandinavian research channels. If true, the existence of Object 472 demonstrates not only surveillance but collaboration, evidence that beneath their political hostility, the two sides quietly shared secrets of nuclear science. When the Finnish-Russian team reported their findings, Moscow immediately invoked Article 12 of the Federal State Secrets Act, restricting all material related to legacy military intelligence infrastructure. The site was resealed. All foreign personnel were repatriated within 48 hours. Vorinin, the radio operator who discovered the signal, later received an anonymous letter postmarked from Murmansk. A single line written in block letters, "Stop searching, it never stopped." He deleted his recordings and shut down his monitoring station. But before doing so, he captured one last transmission on March 22, 2019, logged at 21:14 UTC. The coordinates embedded in the data pointed not to Kola, but to a new location further east, near the Novaya Zemlya archipelago, coordinates that have since been confirmed to correspond to a known Soviet nuclear test. Independent analysts from Sweden's Defense Research Agency reviewed the frequency pattern and concluded it could only be produced by analog vacuum tube transmitters from the late 1950s. The persistence of such a system in operation today defies both logic and engineering expectations. The most plausible theory is that residual current from the reactor's decay cycle continues to power automated relays, perpetuating a transmission loop coded into its final shutdown sequence. Yet even that explanation leaves questions. The message changes subtly each year, incorporating updated timestamps that reflect modern calendar dates. Somewhere, a system built in the shadow of the Cold War continues to count time alive in the ice. Satellite images released in late 2023 show increased activity in the Kola region. Russian military transport vehicles, new fencing, and heat signatures suggest a renewed presence at the site. The official explanation cites environmental cleanup, but locals in nearby Kandalaksha report seeing lights at night and hearing low-frequency hums rolling across the tundra. They call it Zov iz lida, the call from the ice. For intelligence historians, the rediscovery of Object 472 has forced a reckoning with the blurred lines of post-war espionage. The equipment's hybrid design, Soviet casing with Western microcomponents, proves that the ideological divide of the Cold War was less absolute than we were taught. Science moved through shadows, traded in silence, encoded in signals that refused to die. As one declassified Soviet memorandum chillingly concluded in 1962, "In the Arctic, nothing truly ceases transmission. Energy persists. Information endures. The machine remembers." Today, the official record lists Object 472 as decommissioned and sealed. But somewhere beneath the permafrost, that red light still pulses every 11 minutes, 22 seconds. A forgotten signal, transmitting to no one, carrying echoes of the Cold War that neither side ever truly ended. Chapter 4. Operation Ashfall, the Siberian Archives. The fires came first. In the summer of 2022, an unusually dry season turned large stretches of the Irkutsk Oblast into a burning wasteland. Satellite imagery recorded more than 100 individual ignition points across former Soviet military territories. Amid the chaos, a firefighting crew near the town of Cheremkovo discovered a section of ground that had collapsed into a concrete void. Beneath the soot and twisted rebar, they found what looked like the entrance to an underground installation. Faded lettering on the remaining surface read, Projekt Pepel, Ministerstwo Gosударственной Безопасности, Project Ashfall, Ministry of State Security. Within days, the area was cordoned off, aerial photography restricted, and the entire site designated a hazardous materials zone. But photographs leaked before the perimeter was sealed, showing rusted crates, oxygen tanks, and reels of microfilm half buried in ash. Whatever had survived the fire, it was never meant to be found. A joint inspection team from the Russian Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Emergency Situations arrived in early August. Their mandate, at least publicly, was to assess environmental damage. Internally, they were told to retrieve any legacy classified materials of strategic relevance. The bunker stretched for more than 3 kilometers beneath the taiga. In its main hall, archivists discovered hundreds of crates bearing alternating insignia, NKVD, later KGB, and a lesser-known logo reading Technical Bureau 12. Most boxes contained carbonized paper and rusted film canisters, but a few, stored in deeper, cooler sections, had survived intact. Their catalogue sheets dated from 1944 to 1946, with project codes beginning with PASH. When translated, the documents revealed something extraordinary: wartime cooperation between Soviet and German technical teams, continuing even after the two nations were officially at war. The first recovered file, coded PASH 0029, contained a correspondence log between NKVD Colonel Viktor Sidorov and an unidentified German liaison referred to as Dr. M. The entries, written in meticulous type, outlined exchanges of ballistic, data and biological observations, conducted at a shared facility near Smolensk in late 1944. Subsequent pages referenced the transport of test samples and propulsion prototypes to an undisclosed site east of Irkutsk. The exact location matched the newly uncovered bunker. On the final page of the log, a note scrawled in pencil read, "Proceed to bury all results under Directive Eclipse Agreement." Western observers must remain unaware. Historians have long suspected that as the Third Reich collapsed, fragments of German research were quietly absorbed by Soviet intelligence. But the Ashfall documents suggested something more deliberate: an active bilateral program operating during hostilities, shielded from both governments by a handful of opportunistic officers. The scope of the material hinted at a fusion of early rocket propulsion experiments with unethical biomedical studies, an attempt to merge human endurance trials with missile aerodynamics data. testing survival thresholds under acceleration and temperature extremes. The theory sounded impossible until technicians opened crate P-0341 and found within it several sealed glass vials labeled only Serum 9 körperliche Anpassung. Chemical analysis identified the compound as a derivative of ethylene glycol and modified hemoglobin, a prototype oxygenation fluid decades ahead of its time. In September 2022, independent journalist Anna Korotayeva managed to obtain copies of several recovered microfilm reels through unnamed sources in Moscow. Her report, published briefly, under the title Ashfall, the Siberian Exchange, claimed that some reels contained evidence of meetings between Soviet engineers and captured German specialists as late as March 1945. She cited translated excerpts, joint initiative to secure survival under extreme flight conditions. Data to be split, each party holds half. The report was removed within hours, and Korotayeva vanished from public view. Officially, she relocated abroad. Unofficially, her family reported no further contact. Meanwhile, at the excavation site, the research teams encountered a sealed secondary tunnel system. Radiation detectors registered low but consistent gamma activity, suggesting the presence of early reactor materials. Protective teams advanced carefully and reached a vault sealed behind layers of lead and concrete. Inside were charred remains of laboratory equipment, 2 metallic capsules, and several reels of 16mm film. The labels read, PH Visual Records Test Series 7 to 9. One reel survived intact. When played in controlled conditions at Novosibirsk Technical University, the footage displayed grainy images of men in winter uniforms observing what appeared to be a test sled accelerated along a track. The sled carried a mannequin connected to tubes and sensors. After several runs, a human subject was strapped in. The film's final frames showed the figure convulsing as frost formed on the camera lens. A slate card appeared in view. Test concluded. Subject 17 survived 214 seconds. Among the more disturbing recovered artifacts were several exchange manifests listing shipments between the Irkutsk site and a facility identified only as Installation D9. The coordinates provided corresponded to an area near present-day Kazakhstan, long rumored to host early Soviet nuclear research. The manifests included design schematics for advanced fuel mixtures and cryptic notations referencing biological response variables. Together, they suggest that Project Ashfall's ultimate purpose was to study the interaction between biological endurance and propulsion stress to create aircrew and rocket pilots capable of surviving environments beyond human tolerance. The ethical implications are staggering. When questioned, Russia's Ministry of Defense denied all knowledge of the project. However, in late 2023, newly declassified KGB personnel files included a brief reference to Operation Ashfall as part of a 1961 review of historical joint operations, suppressed for political continuity. The summary described it as an unauthorized wartime collaboration resulting in scientific outcomes later adopted in classified aerospace programs. The report concluded with a chilling line: Archive PASH secured, access permanently restricted. Satellite imagery from October 2023 showed rapid construction at the Cheremkovo site, rows of prefabricated structures, heavy vehicles, and reinforced fencing. The official narrative shifted from environmental cleanup to national archival preservation. Yet local residents reported military trucks operating at night, hauling sealed containers toward rail lines bound for Novosibirsk. No one could confirm what those containers held, but speculation mounted that recovered vials of Serum 9 and related documents had been moved to secure facilities for study. Historians examining the surviving material have pieced together a grim hypothesis. During the closing months of World War II, as Germany faced collapse, certain SS scientific divisions sought escape by trading data for asylum. The NKVD, aware of this, captured rather than executed them, incorporating their expertise into hidden programs far from Europe's eyes. Project Ashfall may have been the earliest manifestation of that exchange, a bridge of convenience built on human suffering and scientific ambition. The resulting data would later feed into Cold War aerospace and endurance medicine, shaping technologies that remain in use today. The last segment of recovered microfilm contains a log entry dated December 24, 1945. The author, signing only as VS, writes, "The exchange is complete. Samples sealed, records hidden in the Siberian permafrost. We have done what must never be acknowledged. If the world finds this, may the ice forgive us. That single page, smudged with fingerprints and ash, encapsulates the paradox of Operation Ashfall, a collaboration erased by its own creators, preserved only by fire and accident. As of 2025, the bunker remains sealed again under new steel plates and government oversight. Its coordinates have been removed from public maps. Official reports refer to it as Subterranean Storage Unit Number 47. Yet despite the silence, rumors persist among regional researchers that additional tunnels lead deeper still, below the documented levels, where even the radiation detectors fail to register. What lies there may never be disclosed, but the fragments recovered so far reveal a truth colder than Siberia itself. In the desperate final months of the war, enemies became partners, and the ashes of that union still smolder beneath the tundra, waiting for the next fire to expose them again. Chapter 5: The Black Vault of Lake Geneva. The workers thought it was just another maintenance job, clearing out a forgotten NATO relay hub slated for renovation into a private data center. But when the demolition team broke through a reinforced wall beneath the facility, located 5 kilometers northwest of Lake Geneva, they struck something far older than the 1970s-era communication structure above it. Behind the false concrete lay a perfectly preserved vault, its steel door stamped with a NATO serial, SG 1957 Helix. Inside, dust hung like fog in the stale air. Dozens of magnetic tape reels lined the walls, each labeled in neat block print. Project Helix, restricted 1957. The cables and reel systems were primitive but intact. What startled the contractors most was the single line painted in faded black across the inner door. Archive closed under Directive N43, do not restore power. In late November 2020, the Swiss Federal Department of Defense DDPS took over the site, sealing it beneath tarps and unmarked fencing. The discovery would have remained hidden were it not for an anonymous upload to a digital forensics forum in Zurich. A blurry image showing a document sleeve stamped U-Safe Bio-Division Geneva Exchange Unit. The post was deleted within hours, but not before journalists captured it. Within days, whispers spread of a Cold War collaboration buried in neutral territory. Switzerland, long seen as politically untouchable, had apparently hosted a secret program under NATO oversight, blending Western intelligence with repurposed Nazi research smuggled through Operation Paperclip. The recovered tapes, it seemed, contained the audio record of that union. Declassification requests filed by historians in 2021 yielded fragments of the archive's contents. One transcript, designated Helix Debrief 0219, documents a meeting on 7th March 1957 between British, American, and ex-German scientific personnel in Geneva. Present were Dr. Edwin L. Strauss USAF Biological Countermeasures Division, Professor Karl Mertens, formerly Peenemünde Aeromedical Unit, and 2 unidentified NATO liaisons. The discussion centered on biological inhibition vectors, capable of targeting crops and livestock under conditions mimicking radiation exposure. The justification to develop agricultural recovery contingencies in the event of nuclear conflict. The phrasing was bureaucratic, but the purpose clear: to weaponize biology through food. The transcript's tone grew darker as Mertens described a prior series of field experiments conducted near Stuttgart in 1944, involving modified fungal strains resistant to conventional pesticides. These were the same cultures Allied intelligence had supposedly destroyed after the war. Further analysis revealed that Directive N43, referenced on the vault door, had been issued in 1974 by NATO's Science Committee. It ordered the destruction of all materials pertaining to Helix sub-projects classified under human or environmental application trials. However, evidence from Swiss government archives suggests that instead of destruction, the tapes were secretly sealed beneath the relay station when NATO abandoned the site in 1975. Internal correspondence from the era, declassified only in 2022, records a Swiss liaison complaining of foreign agencies disposing of hazardous materials on neutral soil. The letter was never answered. The recovered tapes, eventually restored by audio experts at ETH Zurich, revealed not only debriefings but live experiment recordings. One fragment dated 23rd of June 1958 captures the voice of a man identified as Dr. W. Ackerman, discussing a trial conducted at Test Range Albatross in the Libyan desert, where aerosol dispersal systems were tested under high temperatures. In the background, a distant hum can be heard, perhaps aircraft engines, perhaps generators. Ackerman describes a vector sequence B72 designed to degrade grain stockpiles without immediate detection. The test, according to his report, succeeded. Within a week, the exposed samples became sterile. Modern microbiologists examining the description concluded that B72 was likely an early strain of a mutagenic fungal pathogen, later mirrored in agricultural collapse. Incidents of the 1960s. When word of the tape's contents reached international press, NATO refused comment. Switzerland declared the site off-limits for reasons of biosecurity. Yet, documents leaked from within the DDPS showed that analysis of the tapes had confirmed collaboration between Western defense agencies and former Reich scientific personnel. A summary report, classified NATO Restricted 2021 Helix, stated, recovered materials indicate unauthorized continuation of pre-1945 experimental lines under institutional sanction. Ethical oversight absent, the report acknowledged. The direct lineage of several Helix researchers to paperclip recruits later absorbed into US and British biological defense programs. By early 2022, independent investigator Lucien Favre managed to obtain access to archival blueprints of the Lake Geneva Vault. They showed a secondary chamber beneath the main archive labeled Vault B Containment Zone. In March, Favre and his team secured limited access under observation. Inside, they found lead-sealed boxes filled with laboratory notebooks, handwritten in German, English, and French. Some bore company stamps of well-known pharmaceutical manufacturers that had later become global brands. The implication was damning. Private industry had quietly inherited the results of forbidden research. One entry, dated 12th September 1956, reads, "Trial compound now stable at room temperature. Awaiting NATO medical certification. Civilian rebranding potential high." The note's signature matched that of a Swiss biochemist later awarded major patents in agricultural chemistry. The Ethics Committee of the Swiss Federal Council launched a brief investigation in 2023. Its conclusion: no prosecutable evidence of contemporary wrongdoing. The files were archived again, sealed until 2075. But whistleblowers from within the inquiry claimed that a number of pharmaceutical patents granted between 1959 and 1965 trace chemical origins directly to Helix documentation. A pattern emerges, a closed circuit of knowledge transfer, where the horrors of wartime biology were repackaged into peacetime science. Forensic analysts working on the tapes identified an especially disturbing section recorded in January 1959. Voices discuss test series 5, Geneva greenhouse, involving aerosol dispersal within a controlled botanical environment. The test subjects were crops, but one voice, believed to be Dr. Mertens, references secondary inhalation data, suggesting human exposure measurements. The sound of coughing and panicked speech is faintly audible. The reel ends abruptly. On the next tape, the participants speak calmly again, as if nothing happened. None of the surviving Helix documents mention casualties. The deeper implication of the Black Vault extends beyond biology. It reveals the quiet complicity of neutral states and international agencies in laundering wartime science through the guise of Cold War defense. A once sacrosanct Switzerland had acted as the meeting point for powers desperate to secure advantages, no matter the ethical cost. As one recovered memorandum dated 3 April 1957 states bluntly, Geneva is the only city where both sides can pretend to be human. By the time the final container was removed from the vault in 2024, most of the documentation had been classified once more. Yet, one photograph escaped suppression, an image showing a single reel-to-reel machine still connected to power, a strip of tape threaded through its reels. The caption, leaked by an anonymous archivist, read, "Reel 17, active since 1958, continuous loop, unknown content." Forensic attempts to play the tape cause system interference and equipment failure. It remains sealed, humming faintly, its ferrite core magnetized by decades of silence. The Lake Geneva facility has since been converted into a digital storage complex, its existence unacknowledged in official maps. But deep beneath, behind the new walls and data racks, the Black Vault persists. It stands as a relic of the Cold War's moral corrosion, a chamber where neutrality and necessity met in the dark. Those who have heard the recovered recordings describe them as monotonous, procedural, and horrifyingly calm, the sound of men turning science into quiet destruction. And every hour, somewhere beneath Geneva's polished streets, the last tape of Project Helix still turns, whispering the truth into the static.